Teresa?
Can you hear me?
Now I can. Have we heard from Russ,
I have not.
Chief Chrisman?
I have not heard from him, but I'd be happy to call either one of them.
Okay, let's call them. We're going to go ahead and get started. How about, there's Roger.
Okay, I'll give him a call.
Okay. Okay, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started with the study session. Unless you want to wait for Chief Chrisman and Russ. Anybody have any thoughts?
I think Chief Chrisman needs to be on board.
Okay, he's coming on right now. Good afternoon, Chief.
There's Russ.
Sorry about that.
Hello, Russ. Okay, we are ready to start. Chief, is this are you starting this off?
Well, I know that Brett and Kim I thought they were going to make a presentation.
Yep, they're here.
Okay.
Okay. So Kim and Brett, there's Brett. Okay. Do you guys want to go ahead and start?
Yes, yes, that would be just fine. We'd be pleased to. So good afternoon. My name is Brett Hansen. I'm Associate Principal and Architect with McKinsey. With me online as well is Kim Doyle, who's our project manager. I'm going to go ahead and take you guys through a recap of the process and the work that we've been working through with the city, with Joe and his group, with the chief and the police department, as well as the Law and Justice Committee. So we've been working very closely with them, and a lot of content we were boiling down into a condensed presentation for you today, and we're happy to take you through that and answer any questions that we have. As I go through this, I'm going to screen share in just a moment, and I'll share that. A little background on McKinsey and myself. I oversee our public projects business unit. We focus primarily on emergency response facilities, particularly law enforcement facilities, a particular focus of mine. So I'm happy to answer any questions with regards to police department development, as well as court facilities, and even more so bringing them together into a commingled facility that we're talking about today. And with that, if you have any questions, certainly interrupt me, and I'd be happy to answer them as we go through it. Otherwise, I have the ability to go back on any of the slides if you wish, and go into more detail as well once I take you through and give you a snapshot of what we've been up to. That, I'm going to go ahead and screen share. Okay, so I just want to verify that you guys can see this. Excellent. Okay. So as far as the content goes, we have about, I think, 16, 17 slides. I'll take you through. We're going to talk about the project process and recap, just kind of give you a flavor of what we've been asked to do, what we traditionally do or typically do on a project such as this. take you through the facility needs overview as far as the concept and the development process that we recommend and usher municipalities like yourself through. And then we'll talk project costs and then open it up to questions and be available for an overall discussion so you guys can facilitate for next steps. As far as the process, this initial phase, phase one that we've been working through with the stakeholders that I indicated, really these parts and pieces can be broken into really two or three primary components. One is going to be our programming or space needs assessment, and I'll touch on that in the next initial slide. That's preparing and understanding what the facility growth needs are. The second component is utilizing that and understanding the site to develop site development options, as well as start to look at the conceptual nature and the conceptual makeup of what the project might invariably be. We go through a number of different iterations on that, and I'll touch on those in more detail on those. But invariably, those are developed and put together so we have enough information, the capacity to begin estimating and putting costs to your project, which is the end result. That's the part we want to talk about as well. And then I wanted to touch on another important aspect of any public project, particularly one that invariably could go out for a general obligation bond and look for community support. We did hold and coordinate with the Law and Justice Committee, as well as the city and the police department, to jointly host a virtual and in-person open house for your community to invite individuals to join us in either of those forums to ask questions and get additional information about the project as we're going through these very early conceptual iterations. So the first step, as I indicated, is the space needs assessment. This is creating a program. This is simply a snapshot of the summary page of a multi-page document. The best way to describe this particular document and this process is that invariably this is representative of what I call the recipe book. It's all the parts, pieces, and ingredients to make up a building and facility. A police department and invariably a court building, they're highly operationally driven. They do have a public aspect to it, of course, which is very important. But a lot of the parts and pieces are very operationally driven. There are best practices, standard applications, there's accreditation, there's a lot of moving parts and requirements, not only at a national but a state level that really drive how these are put together. And so a lot of dialogue goes into that. What we do is we utilize questionnaires as well as in-person interviews. We do our site tours. We look at the existing facility and understand what's working well with that, what's not working, where are those existing space deficiencies. We spend time enveloping ourselves in each individual department and city and understanding how their particular services are put together, how they're servicing their community. Every community is different based on what they're offering and how they engage and support their citizens. And so we look to understand that. As part of that, we're looking at two things that we evaluate and seek to understand and best forecast alongside the municipalities. And that includes first the staffing requirements. Again, that comes back to understanding and best forecasting out what you've seen for growth from a community perspective. What are you seeing for types and quantities of crimes, and what types of services, quantities of services and types of staff might be required in order to support that and bring up and maintain your levels of service. So that's going to be driving your staffing. And invariably that staffing has a contributor on what your space growth needs may be. We do look at a couple different layers there. Obviously move-in is very important, without a doubt. There's no municipality doesn't get to this point if they're not significantly outgrown their existing facilities, such as yourselves. So that move-in is obviously very important, but we want to ensure that we're thinking ahead. We don't want you to be in a position that you're at move-in, you're starting to outgrow, you're deficient in certain areas of your building. So it's important that we're forecasting out for future growth. We're right-sizing your facility and not oversizing it. We're not undersizing it. But we're developing it for move-in ready needs. We're looking ahead. We're looking outwards as best we can to 15-year needs and even as far as 30-year needs. Of course, the farther you get out, there's a lot more volatility to what that might look like. And so through those aspects, and we'll touch on that as we talk about the floor plans, those are invariably going to be surrounded by best practices or more innovative techniques that we can employ on the design side to help with flexibility, adaptation over time to allow for that growth without having to oversize your building and pay more upfront for your facility than you need to. The other, I'm going to pause. It looks like we have a hand.
Sorry, I was just raising my hand for later before you change screens. So go
Okay.
ahead.
Okay, excellent. Yes. So the other aspect of the overall program need assessment is we also look at the site requirements. So we look at parking demands, the type of parking. Is it take-home vehicles, or they're on-site vehicles? Any other demands that we're going to drive the secure parking, but also we're going to look at elements and drivers for the public parking, which when we get there, there'll certainly be some questions on how we develop the overall site development. But we worked closely with the city as far as what those parking requirements are, particularly when it comes to the court facility or community room aspects, emergency operations centers, those types of elements that have a higher demand on parking from the public side, and what those needs are going to be. So, so invariably, this is an important piece of our starting of where we start from, but it's not where we end, and we'll touch on that. So some of the elements here that you're going to see, and we'll talk about when we get to the floor plan. Obviously, you have your municipal court, and then within the municipal court and the police department, we're going to share what we define as common areas. Those are going to be your lobbies, your vestibules, your public entries. That's going to be any other supportive elements such as public restrooms and so forth. It also can include building-specific mechanical or electrical or server spaces as well. Built into each and every one of these is also going to be what we call a circulation factor, which accounts for your corridors, your walls, your shafts, or anything else within the building that takes up space. So we have to forecast that, because space costs money. We want to make sure we have that intel. So that invariably gives us our starting point for where we begin. I know that the Law and Justice Committee, as well as the department, also go through the process of validation. And so that includes site tours that we're conducting, and Chief or Roger can speak more to those, as well as looking at comparable facilities in the region to maintain those. On average, what we find, because we do track these types of facilities at their move-in new dates, and facilities that are a full-service facility that includes evidence in particular, which has a low staffing count but a high square footage need. On average, you can assume about 500 square foot per staff member for the facility. So that kind of gets us a sense. That gives us a ballpark representation of the site sizing for these. The next element that starts to enter into the conceptual design component of this, and a first step for us, is we kind of essentially are gathering information, if you will, before we even design anything, is understanding really what are the overall aspirations of the community, of yourselves, as policymakers of the city or the police department. And so we spend time best immersing ourselves in who and how your community is represented, things that are important to you, not only from a city perspective or citizen perspective, but also just geographically. And so we do immerse ourselves in trying to understand important aspects of who you are and how those types of ideas might contribute to a civic building. We also look at other elements or buildings within your community that might have aspects that could promote dialogue, conversation, elements or buildings that you feel are good representations of your community that you want us to pay attention to as we start to explore and look at options for what this facility might how be characterized. We also collectively develop and prepare a grouping of comparable facilities. And these are really aimed primarily at creating discussion and dialogue. And so we call these visionary boards or precedent images. It's a collection of images that we prepare that have different materiality, different scales, different elements with regards to entry sequence or public aspects. They don't all have to be law enforcement facilities. They don't have to be court. They're going to be different collections of different types of building aesthetics that really promote feedback, right? We want and encourage as much feedback of things that the individuals are not perhaps excited about, but as much as things that people are excited about, things they do want to see embodied in the overall design. We look at roof forms, natural wood, different aspects that might be representative, or strike a chord. And we take that all in as we conversate around these. And so we present these and we solicit feedback for conversation. We also look at transparency or entry sequence from a public perspective. What is your public seeing versus what the everyday user is seeing, or the entry sequence for the police department or court, and how those elements might resonate with the overall group. So these were things that we utilize to promote conversation with the committee. And then also just looking outboard of the type of materials or public plaza spaces, or outdoor space, things that can promote alternative or additional options for how you might use your project or your building, and engage in that, not just for a user perspective for its function, but this could have a higher and more global considerations for your community. And so we take those all in hand. We use that information then to essentially develop what we call a set of conceptual images or options. So we developed 3 conceptual options to represent and discuss with the committee on what how we've captured those ideas and how we've utilized the site. So I'm going to touch on the site in just a moment, but wanted to start here with these 3 options. Looking at this is an option A. Looking at important factors that came into play or part of the discussion. First was having transparency or clear wayfinding, understanding of the entry sequence into the building, looking at materials that were representative of your region or other buildings within the community that were desired. We also looked closely at what types of landscaping and other elements, elements such as snow and rain and wind and sun, how the natural environment contributes to decisions for the building. Also just general functionality and durability and maintainability are also conversations that all happen as it pertains to the overall site design. I pause on this one only because this is the variable selection that we made to move forward for costing. But really some of the drivers here were the materials of the building, but also maximizing higher slope roof forms for metal roofing, limiting low slope roofs for that can collect snow, but we need for mechanical and so forth. So a lot of conversation really surrounded these key elements. And we didn't just explore one, we always explore a multitude. The concept A is what we would refer to as a transitional form. It's not too modern, and it's not too traditional. We try to give a variety of different options for feedback. This option B was really aimed at more of a more modern facility design that represented some different ways in which it captured some of those precedent images. And then option C is what we classified as a more traditional standard gable form, roof form, as well as a slow slope entry sequence in the middle there. Each of them are generally, we try to stay within the toe of the overall budget. So when we're making these decisions, we're not coming at it with a glass box that we know isn't in your budget. We're trying to select and be very mindful and intentional about the types of options that we're presenting, so that they're all generally in the realm of your budget. But there is a low, medium, high, if you will. Option A invariably representing what we would call kind of a middle ground option from a cost perspective. So complementary to that, we can't just, of course, design our facility based or concept character designs purely off of the aesthetics or the precedent images. we're doing that concurrently with evaluation of the overall site design. And we went through and we looked at very closely at your site. We considered some really key aspects that are important to any law enforcement or court facility as it pertains to this. One is going to be building orientation as it plays out within the site, where it's situated, and how that orientation supports public parking and access, wayfinding, clear navigation for your community members as they come and go from the facility. But equally as important, if not as important, is the secure parking. So this is going to be for the police department itself, access into the site, utilizing the building to help screen that, maximizing your double duting elements that we know are successful and proven strategies for siting the facility on a site such as this. Having those key access points, we're limiting commingling of law enforcement vehicular circulation with the public. So having a multitude of access points is very key. And then other key aspects that we looked at as it pertained to the overall building development or the site development was is this building, how do we best use it or use those square footage, whether that's going to a 2-story or multi-story facility, is that going below grade, or is that going with a single-story facility? So we did look at a multitude of different options and how those supported the internal organization of the building, connectivity of those overall functions, connectivity to the parking arrangements. We also considered future growth as part of that, seeking to maximize available space retained for future growth, whether that's for another city function, that's a future city hall, whatever that might be, but preserving space on the site for other elements or functions for the building. At the end of the day, as you start to look at these different options and what we would traditionally see for this type of facility, purely from an operational perspective, but as much so from a cost perspective, is that a single-story facility, if the site's large enough to support that, in which case yours is, and with its complementary parking for public and secure, is really going to be the most economical and efficient way to execute a building such as this and execute a new police department. So we did explore those. We invested time in discussing what those cost premiums look like, where those live. And invariably, this was the decision selected and recommended from ourselves, in which case we moved these forward to further examine how those played out for the floor plans and overall concept designs. One other key element that I'll touch on here that was important, it kind of goes back to that future growth of those future development opportunities, is leaving space, obviously, for future growth, but also preserving some of the aesthetic or the functional elements that are currently exist, and how your community is using that, which is this grass play field. So that was an element that we discussed. Another element of cost control really surrounded only building out the public parking that's really needed today for the municipal court and the police department. So there is future growth along the edges to expand your public parking, as well as in this zone as well, to support that future element. So those are other key elements that were considered. And then lastly, on the concept design, before we can touch into the costing, is surrounds the floor plan. So I mentioned that the needs assessment is really that recipe book. It's that starting feature for us to understand all the parts and pieces of the building. Without a doubt, 100% of the time, it's going to reflect a larger program or larger square footage need than what will invariably be executed. And it's not wholly necessarily driven by costs. A lot of the times, it's purely driven by the efficiency of laying out your building. And it also comes into play how you're applying those programmatic needs. You know, if you're doing as a single-story building, or if you're going 2 stories, in which case you're adding stairs and an elevator and other support functions that are required to allow you to do that. But in this instance, as a single-story facility, some of the key pieces that I wanted to touch on that allowed us to get down to the current target of around 15,000 square feet for this building, which includes the municipal court. Some of the key elements that we're able to economize and take advantage of as the building starts to lay out. First is going to be being very thoughtful on how we're organizing circulation. So you don't have more circulation that's necessary for the building. The circulation functions are developed around core features, core splines. So that's efficient and effective. You're also looking at opportunities for multiple use spaces that can be utilized for outside agencies, conference space, touchdown space, but also serve for future office growth. You know, that these are thinking ahead. You don't have an empty space that doesn't have a current function. Everything has a function, and you're building in flexibility and adaptability for future. We're also looking at other shared spaces, whether it's the municipal court, can be co-combined or utilized after hours for community functions. Also between municipal court and the police departments, looking at opportunities for shared functions such as the break room. In this case, you don't need 2 break rooms. They can certainly share that function as well. And then I think the last piece is when you have two components coming in that have a shared driver for community impact or use, is being very considered over your lobby and your entry sequence, so that's properly placed and it's as economical and efficient as possible. So, and we can come back to, there's a lot of detail that goes into these. I'm sure there will be questions with regards to the floor plan, so we can come back to that. So why do we go through that on a project in a phase 1 such as this? The end result is not to figure out every detail of your project, to design it, get it bid ready, right? We're not there yet. We're very early in the conceptual design of the facility. We're getting it just to the point where we have enough information to develop the site, understand the floor plan, understand the overall makeup of the building as it pertains to the materiality. Yeah, just a second, lots of talking. The overall scale, size, and the complexity of the facility. So that's all necessary. We also go to the level of engaging mechanical electrical engineers to guide and provide recommendations on the type of mechanical systems that might be considered as well. And then putting together a best practices design narrative that represents how this building might come to play, and provide all that information to our cost estimators so they can start to develop those costs for this first pass. So we have Ronan Associates is our cost estimator. We utilize them on the majority of our public projects. They have offices in Seattle as well as Spokane, so they focus on our region. They understand it. That's really important. We don't use a cost estimator that's in the Midwest or down in California. We really focus on understanding our local environment and the contributors there. So a couple key things that our estimators look at when they take our information. First, I want to make sure that it's key that when a project such as this, we would envision going out for a traditional design bid build, or it's going out to market under that delivery method. It's going to be most cost effective for you. So when they're doing that, they're not estimating your low bid. As our costers like say, they're not the ones that are bidding and building your project. So they're going to be estimating what we would call the medium bid. So if you were to get 10 bids on your project, they're really shooting for estimating at this point in time that middle bid. The other piece of it that they look at, I already touched on, is going to be project location and general market conditions. So staying attuned to your locality and the type of contributors, things of that nature. We actively engage and discuss this with our estimators during design process on all of our projects, so we understand what types of trades and materials that are going to be most readily accessible and make the most sense from an economical perspective for your project. So we're not selecting materials that have to be sourced out of Spain or some type of place in Argentina. We're looking at thoughtful proven materials that ideally are gained in your general vicinity. We also look at project comparables, understanding what other bids have taken place. It may not be your exact facility, but it might be something complementary, something that is equally complex and within your region. So they look at that, and they track those on an active basis, and they use that to help not only validate their numbers, but guide those numbers as they put together the estimates. Some of the things that I'm sure you're all acutely aware of, whether you're working on another capital improvement project or you're working on something of your own, you're engaged, in whatever capacity that might be, is going to be other contributors that they have to take into account. And these are things that we just want to touch on. I'm sure you're all more as aware as we are about these, but things that continue to be issues that we go seeing forward is limiting general contractor interest in competitive bids. They're very busy contractors still. And so there's a select group of contractors out there that are interested in competitively bidding versus doing a negotiated bid and such as that. So you have to spend more time engaging them and ensuring that they're aware and getting them to bid your project. So that's an aspect of it. In tow with that, also limited some contractor trades, and this can come in different variations, and it changes on any different quarter as far as who's busy, what they're busy on. A lot of that also comes into play with regards to material availability and shortages. We're experiencing on other municipal projects some significant delays on sourcing of certain project materials, whether it's electrical gear or otherwise, that just have long lead items that affect your schedules, and time is money. And so there's a lot of other contributors that we have to forecast out and be thoughtful of when we're estimating these. It's also a public project, so you're going to pay prevailing wage, so you're going to have a higher wage rate for that, just something to be aware of. But a lot of that and all of that comes into play as far as how it contributes to project construction escalation, which we'll show you in a second. But every year, construction price, whether it's quarterly, it's yearly, it continues to increase. We did see some downticks during the early portion of the recession. Projects that were bid ready going into 2020 during the early parts of the pandemic, when there's a lot of uncertainty out there, projects were going on pause, projects were being canceled from private developers. And so contractors were much hungrier and eager to competitively bid these projects at competitive rates that we would expect for this types of projects. And so they were coming in under engineers' estimates at that time, anywhere from 5 to up to 15% in some cases. We're not seeing that anymore. That's not a surprise, unfortunately, but that's something we have to be aware of, cognizant that anywhere from 4 to 6% on average a year, you're going to see your project continue to increase in price as things continue on. A couple of key things before we kind of get into the crux. I have 4 or 5 more slides, so if you're tracking for time. I want to just quickly touch on what makes up your project cost. First is going to be your largest portion of your project cost. This is going to be your construction cost or your hard cost for your project. What this includes is going to be your on-site construction costs, is your site improvements. It will include in your off-site construction costs, front-end improvements or otherwise. In your case, that should be fairly limited, which is good. Building construction costs for the overall vertical construction itself. Within all of these, of course, you're going to have your general conditions for your general contractor, your GC fees, bonds, insurance. We do carry an estimator's contingency during the estimating component of it, so you're going to see that in there. That estimator's contingency or design contingency essentially is a percentage of the overall estimate because the project is so early in conception. There's a lot of things to still figure out, and so they carry a design contingency or estimator's contingency within that to account for all the unknowns that would be figured out and progress and be dialed in as the overall design progresses. And then lastly, as I mentioned, escalation. So that's going to be your construction costs. That's your blue. The next major component that can't be forgotten, unfortunately, with public projects, entities or others that are familiar with forecasting and managing total project costs, unfortunately can often forget this very key component. Your soft costs, which will make a lot of sense as I go through this, is essentially it's going to be everything that's not construction related, everything the contractor is not doing. And this can range anywhere for this type of facility, anywhere from 30 to 40% of your budget. So it's a significant amount. And that's going to include your design fees, any expanded or specialty design fees. It's going to be reimbursables if you bring on your project manager. Because this is an essential facility, it has a higher level of seismic and structural requirements. Also has additional code requirements. So you're going to have special inspections over a traditional project for them to investigate and come out and do that. You're going to have geotechnical engineering for your subsurface soils, topography, your boundary surveys, hazard materials, should they come up. In your case, that shouldn't be a requirement, but they're often are. And these next pieces are going to be your fixtures, furniture, and equipment. Police facilities have lockers, they have evidence lockers, they have rolling compact shelving, and a host of other key operational specific requirements that have to be purchased and provided for your project. We also have special security requirements, relocating police departments, particularly evidence elements that have chain of custody requirements, do have specialty moving needs. So in your case, if you're moving a limited amount, it should be fairly limited, but those do come into play. And then the last three pieces are going to be your permit fees, your sales tax, and then again, you're going to carry your owner's contingency for the overall project. So that's going to cover any early design decisions, but also going to carry forward to construction to ensure you're carrying for change orders and otherwise through the course of that. So the construction estimate that was developed for the project, our goal and our driver was to look for a project between 8 and 10 million. That was our task from the committee and that's total project cost, right? So we went through a number of different exercises for that. We are going to show you the total project cost that does exceed that. So I want to say that now so you're not surprised if we're already aware. But there are measures that can dial you back to that, and we can certainly answer questions on that. But we want to start with where we've arrived and allow the committee and the chief to speak to what those needs are and allow you to make decisions from a policy perspective based on priorities. But we're going to start right here before we go to the overall project costs and touch on the two concepts that we priced. One is concept A, and this is effectively your all-in concept. This is the concept that was derived from the present images, the conceptual images. It's concept A. It's the one image that we selected to move forward. It's based on that site development diagram as well as that floor plan diagram. And then we also priced concept A reduced, and I'll touch on that as we get to that slide, kind of what that entails. There's aspects that are built into that helped us reduce those overall costs. They're based on 15,000 square feet for these, so we've not invariably taken and started to reduce the building at this time. Certainly an option. And then some of the key elements here, we touched on the buildings costs, the site costs, the general condition support. We're looking at a duration of around 12 months for construction, so they have to look at that. And then the last component that I mentioned is going to be ensuring that you factor in for your construction values your escalation. So that's incurring here. So one key element I mentioned per year, it's going to be 4 to 5% on average per year, but our estimators are not estimating out to the day your contractor starts, because that's not when your contractor is going to bid it. They're going to look at midway through their bid, because they're going to want to hit that middle point as far as when they're bidding the overall project. So our estimators, when they're putting together this escalation point, they're going to be looking out to how far ahead to when the project would get funded, when the design would start, how long design and permitting takes, when it's going to hit the street, and then midway through construction. And that's where this escalation comes in. So the best bid protection that you guys can have. So as we mentioned, you know, we have a path towards that 8 to 10. There are aspects that come in. We're very pleased we'll talk through those with you guys. But these two we were asked to bring forward to you for consideration. This is the concept A. This is a representative of the total project cost. So again, you have your construction costs, your hard costs up front. You have your soft costs represented here, including your sales and your project contingency, and then your overall total budget costs at the bottom here. These are some key aspects that we've touched on as far as the duration, the construction start, and the size. This is uniform between concept A and concept A reduced. As mentioned, essentially, this is representative of the concept A. So it's untouched, we've not reduced it, but effectively it's as rendered. The exterior of the building is represented by concrete masonry units or CMU, but they're colored, they would have a coursing to them. And then interior of these concrete bearing walls, you have a steel structural framing, concealed fastener panels, along with that exterior cladding for a high level of durability and maintainability for those. We're maximizing to the greatest extent possible metal roofing where we can, minimizing our low slope roofs for just simply where we need our mechanical systems. Interior of the building, you know, we're providing allowances for a higher level of finish. When I say higher level finishes, we're not talking about just pretty or aesthetic. These are a high level like epoxy finishes and so forth that have a higher level of long-term durability to the project, but they do come as a cost. And then the last element that we've maintained on both of these, which is an operational component, is this rear parking canopy, which offers protection from the weather for the patrol vehicles when they're on site at the building. So whether that's sun, that's rain, that's snow, sleet, etc., they're under cover so that they're not out in the elements. Option A reduced is same reflection here. A few of the things that were employed on this particular option that may not be readily seen through this updated rendering. So I'm going to touch on those. So the overall aesthetic came down to the extent we're looking at reducing the overall massing. For that, what that entails is we remove this portion of the roofing. We look at lowering the overall roof form down a bit. We've also looked at reducing the entry canopy. So just some key things there. The exterior of the building would no longer be concrete masonry, but you would go to a wood frame structure, which is very common. It's not, you know, it's still a very common application for a public facility. So that's not something to be too concerned over. But what it does do is it would be a trade-off of the exterior masonry for a wood-framed exterior structure, wood-framed roof joists, and so forth. And then the exterior paneling of the building would be reduced down to something more economical, whether that's more of a commercial grade cement board. We're not talking hardy plank, but more of a commercial grade cement board and/or exposed fastener metal siding. You know, still using CMU veneer at elements locations low, where we can use those to still protect against the elements during the year. Looking at reducing the overall standing seam roof. Metal roofs will cost more than single ply thermoplastic roofing here. So you can see that represented here. These aren't readily visible because it's still a low slope to the project. And then other elements we talked about is we maintain the police canopy to the back. We would look at reducing interior finishes, other elements within the building. These are what we call target values reductions. We don't have all the details particularly worked out, but those are elements that you would target in and say this is going to be what we're moving forward with. Other elements on this particular one, which you could certainly also just a la carte and choose to do regardless, would be looking at reducing the planting islands within the parking lot. This is certainly something that Joe and the Public Works Department would be interested in, of either option, frankly, to reduce not just cost, but also for maintainability, snow removal, and so forth within here. And then reducing landscaped elements around the edges for maintainability and so forth. And so those are just some key elements between the two. Really, again, the big ones between these two are going to be the structural system, it's the roofing, and it's the overall massing of the building itself, and general exterior envelope aesthetics that come into play. So with that,
Brett, sorry to interrupt you. Can you, now that you've explained this, can you go back to the other slides so we can see any differences?
Absolutely, and this is that was my last slide, so that was great timing. So that here's the differences between the two, and I'll kind of go forward here, and I'll come back to it. So you can see here, this is this roof, the size here, really a lot to do with here, and this is still very early in concept, so it just kind of gives you a sense of how we started to evaluate and identify ways in which you could reduce your overall costs for the project. So with that, I want to thank you guys for it's been some great working for the committee. We're happy to be here today to take you through this, and that concludes my presentation to it. So I'll turn it over to. I'll leave it up for the time being until you tell me otherwise. I can go back to any slides if we have questions, but if the chief or anyone else wants to add on to anything that's presented today, I'll go ahead and conclude and open it up. Thank you very much.
Brett, I have a question on the second slide that you gave. You referred to, I think, as the ingredient or the what needs to be included. Keep going.
Yeah, it's to be the program summary here. So I'll get too far. There you are.
There you go. So one of the things we talked about previously, and I saw it on a later slide, but I see discussion about a municipal court and the police department, but we talked about, at least amongst the council, about doing council chambers as well. How does that integrate into this list? Is it already included, just not noted on this list, or how does that factor in?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question, and that was a conversation piece as we talked about that, particularly as we got into the nuances of a joint municipal court council chambers. So, because we had asked the question from a design perspective, our question is this a municipal court that doubles as a council chambers, or is this a council chambers that doubles as a municipal court? Because they have very competing components of how they're utilized. So this is at least right now, this is currently planned as a municipal court that could be utilized for council. So that is something that we've considered.
Thank you.
Russ, it's important to note too that it would also have some functions as a community room in addition to the court and the council chamber.
Can you, Roger, can you go over that a little bit more? How, where would that take place? And what's the vision of what those functions might be?
Community space would be, if a particular group wants a meeting space or something that's available to go through. Of course, your court and council take priority in use, but rather than just have a room sitting vacant all the time, have some ability to open that up. There are some issues You need to secure things if you have public in, especially from the court standpoint, but those are all things that we discussed that are certainly workable options within that same structure and basic same cost analysis. So maybe a little bit more to seal off a certain portion of it.
If I had to expand on what Roger is sharing, there's certainly elements that you can see here. This is the court counsel, looking at how the dais and this can integrate into one another. There's a lot of different solutions for how this can be put together. Whether these are elements that are movable versus fixed. There's also the capacity to, as you start to consider budget and where you align those budget of integrating in movable partitions. So you have the capacity to move elements back, secure those, and allow for the space to be used by the public. So there's a lot of different ways to shake that out, but there's certainly options.
Kevin,
One other aspect of that was to allow for that to become an emergency operations center for us also. And pardon me for interrupting you, Mayor.
That's okay. Okay, Kevin?
Yeah, I'm just mostly for Chief Chrisman. I'm looking at this and I see four places called sergeant offices. How many sergeants are we have on per duties?
It's a fair question, Kevin. I guess the first thing I want council to understand is that this is a 50-year building. And so we have projected space in here that would go out 30 to 50 years. At the current moment, and as Brett mentioned earlier, we're going to move into this building and it's not going to be 100% occupied. We have currently no sergeants in the investigations bureau, but we anticipate that at some point that we would need a sergeant and potentially somewhere down the road, a person's sergeant and a property sergeant somewhere down the road. In patrol, we currently have one office where 4 sergeants share the office. And so what we've done here in the light blue is you've got 2 sergeants' offices, and there would be 2 sergeants assigned to each office. And the idea behind this is that you'd have a day shift and a night shift sergeant in each of those offices so that they could coach, counsel, direct, do performance appraisals with their respective their teams. Does that address that?
Yes, thank you.
You bet.
Russ?
Question I would have on the reduction of costs that option A versus A reduced. Talked about some difference in building materials versus some aesthetics. And I know Public Works loves it when we remove grass, so it doesn't have to be maintained and mowed. And I think that's not a horrible idea as long as we can make it look decent. And I think we can. But in regards to the building materials themselves, are we changing this building from a specially designed building for our PD to something anybody could have built? We don't have to pay a specially engineering company for?
So to understand your question, are you referring to the material makeup of the building, or?
Yeah, if you want to go to slides, the one that has option A and option B, or excuse me, option A and option A reduced, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah. So the next one you talked about change. So this one has reinforced masonry exterior walls, steel structural framing, and things like that. And option B or option A reduced shows obviously removing some of those aspects, right? I guess I'm wondering, and this is not a hit on you, Brett, or your firm there, but I'm wondering if we're doing a police building, why would we hire somebody who's we hired you because you have expertise in police facilities, and if we just wanted a stick-built building, why would we hire somebody with the expertise of a police station? And maybe Chief has a better response to that. I don't know, but I feel like a police station is more of a specialty building and not just a building that would house a city hall or something like that.
Yes, Russ, this is Jeff over in planning and building. So as one of the committee members in reviewing all the options, we were tasked with looking at different options for reducing the overall cost of the building. And as we did so, we realized that, of course, some of the features of the building, when it talks about wood framing and things like that, all of the protective, I'll call it portions of the building that are special to police stations, Mackenzie has, and Brett has kept that into design. So if there's ballistic glass needed, or there's other exterior building features to protect the officers within or the people inside, those rooms have that protection built in. But there's also other portions of the building where we can possibly save money by going and changing the building materials that we're using to construct that building. And yes, wood frame construction does reduce the overall lifespan of a building because it's not a forever material as much as like CMU, but it also is less costly, or at least when we did the estimate, it was less costly. I don't know if Mackenzie has updated it since the last time that building materials have jumped up again. But that's just to give you an idea. So we did look at all that, and I'm sure Brett can get into more detail. But also, this is the cost projection of what it would be that we're going to have to put out for bid on this, so we can get a number to go to construction. The construction company is going to come back and tell us, what they can build it for, and going to be the ones who are actually constructing the building.
Let me elaborate a little bit further. I guess my question is, why would we have option A if we didn't? Why would we have designed option A if we didn't need it?
Well, I think I can answer that, Russ, and the answer is that we did the projected study on the front end of what we needed in our police department, and I want to make sure that everyone understands that we left things on the cutting room floor in order to get the costs down. And so what we got to at the end was a building that was higher in price than the $8 to $10 million that the original directive was to get a new building built to. And so we went back to Brett and his team and said, how do we get this price down? And what he did and what they did was they eliminated things. And to get to your original question, I asked the same question in the last construction committee meeting. I don't know, at this point, I don't know why we hired Mackenzie, other than the original reason, which was they are very skilled and have a great deal of expertise in building police departments. And so what we have in the reduced version in front of you is a stick-built building, where we had CMU materials, block materials in the past. We now have, timber, a wood frame with a concrete or hardy backer board. And so where the front of the building may be bullet resistant, in the first option A, in option A reduced, chances are a bullet could pass through that. So we rely on ballistic glass in the front reception area, but any of the office spaces or the courtroom, facing the street isn't fortified in any manner. So your answer is fair, and your question is fair, and I think the answer is yeah, we could have stuck with a local architect to make a stick-built building. But I advocated for McKinsey because they build police departments and municipal buildings and other, buildings that they have an expertise in. But this is where we got to.
And if I might add in, one of the things we often face is that, our goal is to use our process and how we take these projects through. We're very methodical, going through understanding, using comparables and statistics and you name it, all these pieces that we have at our disposal based on our experience to develop a program. So we have a definitive starting point for everyone to understand what we're doing. We then layer on that, of course, best practice and industry experience on how we put the building together and organize it, and what we put where, what makes the most sense to double duty, what shouldn't you compromise on, and how you might organize your priorities. And we do the same thing for the site development. That invariably gets us to a starting point of how the building might shake out. And again, as we go through these processes, we're always being mindful and cognitive of what your budget is. So we're not picking, we chose CMU because it was practical, it made sense, but we didn't pick, Core 10 steel or some fancy material that's going to be harder to or more expensive to get or to install. Like, we're trying to be very mindful and thoughtful of best applying those types of practices. But at the end of the day, we want to set our baseline. So we set our baseline and we see that our baseline is above our budget. So as architects, particularly ones that work and focus on public and municipal projects, that's all we do for the most part. That's what our team does, is we're often between a rock and a hard place. You have a need, and then you've also you're asking us, and we take it very, very, very seriously, that you have a budget. And we come up with the greatest best practice design for you and your city, but you invariably have a budget, and that budget needs to be approved and understood and accepted by your community. Otherwise, it means nothing, right? Your project can't move forward. So we take that very, very seriously. So when we arrive here, we say, okay, we're utilizing all of our tools in our toolbox based on our experience to arrive at a baseline. But we're not done yet. Our job is still to show you a path towards your budget. And so, as the chief point, there's always a path, and there's no project that doesn't require taking close looks at your budget, looking at ways to reduce that. Even after you have a bond, you're always managing your budget because things change. Pandemics happen, or wars. What's new? I wonder how else is we going to? In Seattle, we have concrete strikes that are affecting our public projects. So it's invariably changing. So we have to be very cognizant of that. But as we look at those, you have to look at the options, and what we present and we do establish is, we're going to use our expertise to provide you options to save money, where it's not going to necessarily affect your capacity to operate as a police department. We're going to be protective of those because we know where it's important. We're also going to be mindful of where you apply your dollars, where it makes the most sense, whether that's ballistic protection, whether that's going to be maintainability, durability. We know where these buildings get beat up. The police can be hard on the buildings. The public can be hard on the buildings. We got to be careful where we suggest you spend your money. So where we're offering areas of cost reductions aren't necessarily things that are going to have a huge detrimental effect on your capacity to do it. Yeah, doing a wood frame building over steel, might that reduce your lifespan? Sure. Are you still going to get a great building? Absolutely. And at the end of the day, that's where we really come in to help be guiding posts for those types of conversations and decisions. Whereas you go through that and you have to ask yourself, which I'm sure will be a conversation for you all. Is, you have a $12.4 million, and there's still other areas and work to be done if you choose to save costs. But then you have an 11.8, and you're starting to make some initial contributions. There's a whole host of other ways to save money on these buildings. Would we suggest them or recommend them as a first choice over going out and either getting more money or looking at other ways to reduce your project? Most likely not, because of what we've experienced and how we would recommend you put this type of project together for yourself. So I just wanted to add a bit on to that, because I think that's a very valid question, and something we face on. Budget and need are always kind of fighting one another at times. So,
Roger, you have your hand up.
Yes, I did, just in response part of to Russ's question. What really brought up the conversation on landscaping was when we toured the Union Gap police station. And it's not the initial cost as much as it is the maintenance cost. And they bid theirs out, the lowest bidder. If you've been down there and seen their police station, they don't have a lot of landscaping, but their lowest cost was an annual bid of $40,000 just for maintenance of their landscaping, in addition to the water cost to water their lawn out front was beyond that. So that initiated the conversation anyway about how much landscaping do we need, and what's that ongoing cost to us is, whether the city would do it themselves or bid it out like Union Gap did, that it's still a cost. That those city employees, if they're doing it, they could be doing something else to the benefit of the city also. So that's what initiated it. And there are considerable dollars involved in the parking lot island and the landscaping. So, I don't remember right off the top, but I believe it was somewhere close to 100,000 on those for the parking lot and the landscaping combined.
Russ, do you have your hand up again?
Yeah, I don't have any problem with the landscaping. There, you can do some xeriscape landscaping that looks fantastic. So I really have any issues there. I'm just trying to determine the cost savings benefit of going to a stick-built building versus a reinforced building. If we're talking about safety of our police officers, and if we're talking about someone shooting up the building, they're not going to pick and choose which part of the building that they're going to shoot into typically, right? They're just going to shoot. And so if we're protecting one part of the building with the I forget the term, can you go to the previous slide there, Brett? Yeah, the reinforced masonry exterior walls. My personal opinion is the whole building be built out of that, instead of picking and choosing which parts we're okay with bullets flying through. But on the flip side, what is the cost savings to a taxpayer to reduce that $600,000? What does that mean to me and my neighbor in terms of a monthly annual cost on our homes?
Great question. I don't have that data myself, so I'll have to defer to others.
So I can share with you some of the numbers that I've crunched for a bond. So I'll just use whole numbers, Russ. If you had a $400,000 house, an $11 million building would be $13.75 a month. If it was a $12 million building, it would be a monthly cost of 13, about $15 a month. So, less than a couple dollars a month difference, if I'm looking at this right. And I'm kind of shooting on the fly here.
So just to clarify, we're in order to remove the reinforced masonry exterior walls and steel structure framing, we're saving ourselves about, as someone who owns a $400,000 home, we're saving ourselves about $20 a year.
Yeah. So annual, if you wanted to look at it annual, a $400,000 house is going to cost about $165 a year in $11 million building versus $180 a year. So, or $13.75 a month for an $11 million building, or $15 a month for a $12 million building. So yeah, it's a couple of bucks a month.
Thank you.
I have a question for the committee. Earlier, you were talking about the council being in with the court. Is that what the plan is? Because I thought the council was going to be staying over here at City Hall.
It is good. The council and the what we're talking and the court would be in the same room as it is now, but in the new building is what the options are listed right now.
Okay.
What if you go back to that original inside drawing, Brett, the American C, that if you look, there's kind of a horseshoe
Right.
table, I guess I'll call it, or a U table.
Right.
That's where the councils would sit, and then the other folks like Teresa would be back maybe in the judges area, or it's hard to see on the screen, but some of the other areas and support areas and staff could be on either side. And then the general audience is over near the back portion of the room where it's EOC storage up against that. And then we had talked about that this, like other police stations and court and council rooms, would have, all of the, I'll call it the latest technology with regard to being able to broadcast or film the different council meetings, and or have people appear for court would be able to possibly video in or zoom in, or however they do that. And there would also be some type of TV screen or audio video or whatever that's out in the lobby area, so that way if you had overflow, people could see what's going on in the meeting.
Okay. So in that cost, is all of the wiring included in this building for the EOC and all of the updates that are going to be happening? Is that cost included in this final cost?
Yes, that's accurate. Yes.
Okay.
Mayor, the jury deliberation room on the chart would also serve as the council's executive session meeting room.
Okay.
Chief, I have a question on emergency response for your officers when they leave on a call. What would be their standard route of exit? Would they go down the alleyway? Would they come through the parking lot? And is that current scenario sufficient? Will there be access to the 4th Street, or is that going to be partitioned off?
Russ, my understanding is that North 4th Street would not be accessible to us. You'll see on the diagram here that we don't even have an exit, ingress or egress off of that side of the building. All of our movement would be through that alleyway on the right-hand side of the diagram.
Will, Brett, maybe this is for you. 4th Street sits up quite a bit higher than the land there that we're proposing to be built on. Are there security fences high enough to block visual? I mean, we're not talking just an 8-foot fence, right? We're talking about fences high enough to block visual and access from 4th Street. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's certainly feasible. This line here be representative of our fence line, and so that can follow the grade up in and around there, during design to facilitate that. Because you're right, this does increase in elevation as you go up through here.
Rocky, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to remind council, 4th Street is going to turn into a walking trail as part of the wastewater collection system improvements. So that will no longer be a street. It will be only a walking trail. And that's why the police department will not have access to that area.
This will create some upgrades to that alleyway though also.
Can you elaborate on that, Roger? What upgrades and is that estimated into the project?
That's a conversation that we need to have yet, but yes, it would be a separate analysis other than the current assessment for need of curbing and whatever on that side would be part of the project, but improvement to the alleyway would be a different conversation.
Are you talking about making it wider? What are you talking about besides curb and gutter?
Yes.
Councils, Kevin, I see your hand up.
Yeah, so what at this point in time, what would be the process? For example, say there's some things on that reduced cost that we do like, some of those things that we don't like. At what point in the process are those things determined? When does that occur? For example, I was thinking we don't need the epoxy flooring. We could go with the sealed concrete, but we might want to keep the exterior structure the way that we like in the original one. So when are those types of things decided, and by who and when?
I would say, based on our experience working, through these types of processes, particularly like a pre-bond situation, kind of where you're at, determining like, well, what's our ask? This is when you would want to make that. You can now, when I say you want to make that determination, it doesn't lock you in. Again, we call it target value analysis, where we're saying we're going to target this level. You're not going to target. If you chose, we're going to have low finishes. That's our target value. You're going to have high finish, or you say we want to have to make sure that you guys are envisioning and budgeting for a middle ground finish, as an example. This is when we want that to occur, those conversations. We certainly want you to make decisions on some of the larger elements, that impact some bigger chunks of the project, such as, are you going to move? Do you want to move forward with the structural, the roof changes, those types of things, because those have a bigger impact on it. But realistically, where you guys are situated right now, you're sitting between, was it 12.8 12.6 and 11.8, give or take. So you're kind of, as you move and you come in there, you're going to be right in the middle range, somewhere in that variation. This is a process that we suggest and recommend any municipality that you go to this level of detail. So you kind of know what you're getting. You know what you're generally purchasing. You don't have, not everything's figured out. There's still room for design consideration, not only for yourselves but the community. So you're not locking everything in. So there's a lot of decisions ahead of this. A lot of project ahead of this. But you guys have a lot of information, so you can make those more fine-tuned considerations. We've had municipalities say, well, what's the average cost per square foot? We have a site, how much square footage we need? Okay, that's what, we didn't even go to this level, right? They're like, okay, that's what we're going to be asking for. There's a lot of downsides to that, because on what you're buying, what you're getting, what you're communicating to your community. So you guys are in a good spot, but this is when you'd want to make those decisions in a fine tune. And we have a list of those. There's a whole host. Like I said, I called it a la carte. You might want to do, for instance, into this one, you might say, well, we want to still do all the landscaping aspects that Roger described. You want to do those anyway. And so those would come off of option A. You may want to do some other aspects of the epoxy flooring or other elements, as you mentioned. And so those are things that can be considered now.
Kevin?
Since I'm going, what's the ceiling structure within the building itself? Is it a drop ceiling throughout, or what's that look like?
It's going to be a combination of acoustical drop ceilings, open structure where we don't need to spend money on ceilings, such as like in evidence or the warehouse component of it. And then there will be areas that have a higher security, gypsum ceiling and so forth as well. So it'll be a combination, but most of it's going to be acoustic tile ceilings.
Thank you.
Joe?
Well, Brett, just a second ago, you said something about adding back in all the landscaping. Is that what I heard correctly?
No, you heard the opposite. I was saying you could extract it out of option A.
Oh, okay.
I was suggesting that you may want to do that, take advantage of that cost saving reduction we have under option A reduced for the landscaping.
Okay.
On both either scenario, you may want to just do that anyway. We expect you would.
Yeah. Well, that I wanted it out just not only for the construction costs, but the ongoing watering demand. And then in the winter, plowing the snow would be much simpler. And then the collection of stormwater is also simplified. But recently I've been hearing that Washington State may make gas-fired heating and air conditioning and hot water. Might throw that out, and now you're going to have to go with some form of electric systems. So I'm not sure what that'll do to this cost as well.
Yeah, we try to stay attuned to that. They've been very busy in legislation.
Yeah.
Coming up with all kinds of things that affect our municipal projects. So that would certainly be one of them. I think it's not so far off of what we're already planning. So I think you guys should actually be in good shape with what building systems we're thinking.
Okay. Yeah, because I don't know. I think that's going to get a lot of blowback, and
yeah,
who knows if it'll survive. But anyway, that's out there. I just been listening to everybody and trying to not chime in all the time. But 4th Street, yeah, when we do that sewer project, that's going to come a walking path. And you see your site plan shows that sidewalk wrap it all around going up 4th. We really don't need that. And that was one of the other things we've been discussing is about when we go out to communicate more with the public. When we talked to the people down in West Richland, they didn't show a lot of, if any, of the site plans to the public, because then during design, if things have to change because of cost, then we don't wind up falling into this pitfall like there was with the with the aquatic center, where they showed this, said this, and then later on they didn't get that. Basically, they were saying we're going to build a municipal facility. It's going to have a council. It's going to have court. It's going to have a police station, and it's going to be at this site. And it's going to provide, parking and some grass area to maintain some area for residents in the area to utilize. Yeah, other than that, I mean, I don't know. It's either one is sufficient. And I will get into some more of the funding discussions when we get into the AIS under old business, when we get in the regular council meeting. That's all I have.
Thanks, Joe. Russ?
Yes.
Yeah, in terms of, I don't know if, obviously we can't take any votes, but if I had to look at this for cost savings, we live in a desert. And if there's an opportunity to remove some of that landscaping that can't be used for gathering space, I do kind of like the, I call it park-like setting out there right on West Natchez. But the grass around the perimeter, if we can do a basalt or something like that and still make it look good, some trees or some bushes or whatever, that's fine by me. As far as which option to go with, I was wondering, Mike's been really quiet, and as a retired police officer recently, I would love his input as being on the committee.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I'm kind of like what you had said, Russ, that, make it as, not that you're going extravagant, because we've done as much as we can to chop costs on this thing to present it to the council. But the safety aspect is going to be huge. That's why I think option A. When we got with Mackenzie, we did it all as a committee, and we know that they know what needs to be inside that building, and that's why they are so important. They've done great work on some of the other projects they've done, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel going forward with this because they already know what needs to be inside. I can use like Yakima PD, for example, because I was working there when their building was built. And it wasn't long before somebody escaped through one of the roofing tiles, because it was just a regular contractor that did it, and they didn't know that was something that could be done. So these, as Brett was talking about, there's different security levels for each room, whether it's a evidence room, armory, jails, or not jail space, but holding room space. So there's a lot of things to take into consideration here, and not only having the different rooms within the building, but also their locations and making sure that they're in the right spot, so you're not walking somebody that's in custody halfway across the building. So yeah, I like option A minus the landscaping, and that's just the landscaping thing, I think, is just because of what Roger had said when we learned that from Union Gap PD, that $40,000 a year, we don't want to be adding extra expenses to what we already have.
Jeff?
I guess what I just wanted to add is, I think what the council kind of answered Kevin's question directly is what we're looking at with this study session is really, this is your opportunity to ask questions of the committee and all of the members, and how we got to where we got to. And I think what you have to remember is we were trying to live within the spirit of the guidelines that we were given by council when this was initially set to us, and keep within the price guidelines that were set. And and also work with McKinsey and get the best building for our city. What resulted was that we actually had most of the options, did not fit within those guidelines. And so it came down to, the committee felt that maybe we would bring you two options. One that was the one that everybody felt was the best option, which was the option A. And then we went with an option A reduced. So that way we could show you, the council, exactly, that we're considering what the direction you gave to us, and try to get the cost down if the council felt that this was too much. And so eventually the council, just like Brett said, the council is going to have to, discuss, look at the different options, but you're going to have to give some kind of approval at the actual council meeting of what option you would like to move towards. And then Joe and can give direction, or the council can give direction back to the committee if they would like to have us sharpen our pencil and work further on different aspects of whatever option the council decides to go with.
Thank you, Jeff. Cliff, you have your hand up?
Well, I think Jeff already said most of what I was going to say, but sort of to answer Russ's question of why do we have option A reduced if why did we hire McKinsey if Chief had mentioned before that there is a lot of stuff that we wanted and thought that we might need or use that ended up on the cutting room floor, and we came up with option A, and with it still being over the budget that we were aiming for, we went back to McKinsey and said, whatever else you can. And that's how we came up with the A reduced. And so like I said, basically what everybody else has said, but in response to what the other committee members thought and where we were and how we got to where we are. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Kevin?
I just want to address the carport canopy. And the reason I basically asked is because I know that was a thing that Union Gap dropped off their thing. So I'm looking at what we see as the benefits of that, and do we have an estimate of what that canopy runs?
Yeah, so we actually originally had that canopy actually originally went the entire length of the back to provide the most coverage for covered parking, and we reduced it down in half. The back canopy is probably in the range of about $200,000. They are expensive. I've yet, in nearly 18 years of focusing on law enforcement facilities, not had the canopy on a value engineering list. I've also yet to not had a chief that told me that to go find something else. It's one of the easy ones to target. It's the hardest ones to get rid of. It does have an operation. I think this one covers, I want to say 9 stalls, 10 stalls, somewhere in that range. To support the different shifts with regards to patrol and otherwise. And a lot of it has to do with just protecting it from elements. Those patrol cars are, of themselves are very expensive. And having them under coverage, so officers, with their parking out there, they're covered, they're not coming out, and if they're going on shift or they're responding or what be it, having to scrape snow or ice or or keep their cars. Usually it's like, all right, well, I just kept my car running. They just park it out there and they just leave it with air conditioning on, sitting out in the lot because they're not covered. So there's a lot of aspects that come into play with the covered carport. So there's other elements we do employ out there, such as charging for those vehicles, ease of maneuvering. If they have detainees, we specifically chose that portion of the site because the holding area is on there. Not to say that you can't walk someone out from the vehicle into the booking area in the rain or the snow, but you cover that. And now you've created a safer area to circulate and operate underneath there. So there's a lot of different aspects that come to that. But I'm glad you brought that one up. That's one that often is a question.
Thank you.
Mike?
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe expound a little bit on that parking area or the covered parking. We went to several of the different police departments, not only new ones, but also Ellensburg, which was a remodel. And they added the covered parking. They said it was a lifesaver for them, not only for their personnel, but also for their vehicles, because of the computer systems in there that have to be running so the batteries don't die, all of that stuff. And they said that they were really glad that they did that. So it's not just for the convenience of the officers, it's also for the equipment to protect it from the elements, whether it be the sun or the snow, and then also being able to get somebody safely inside the building if you have them in custody.
Thank you.
Elizabeth?
So first of all, I would say as a homeowner, I would be willing to spend $2 extra a month probably for option A, for the safer, the reinforced walls and the bulletproof glass. I think that's really important. Minus the grass, the extra grass, like Russ was saying. But my question was about like the alleyway and the flow of traffic as it involves the school across the street. Like during pickups and drop-offs, like do parents utilize that alleyway? Do they park there? Would that be like an issue if a police car needed to leave, or like are there any concerns with traffic and safety being so close to the school?
We haven't seen congestion in the alleyway. Now out on West Natchez and around the school, of course, during drop off and pickup, there have been some issues with parents that have, are pulling in to either pick up or drop off their children. I will, be completely transparent. One of the concerns that I've heard from some citizens is that we're going to be right across the street from the school, and our officers may be responding to calls for service, and the concern is, are the kids safe? And my assurance to them is that yes, that our officers are going to do their very best due diligence to make sure that no one gets hit in the roadway. We can't respond to an emergency if we create an emergency, and our people know that. But I haven't seen any congestion on the alleyway there next to the building. I would also say that some of the community members have shared with me that they're very happy that the police department is right across the street from the school, because if something were to happen bad things happen sometimes, right? That the police are right nearby. So there's always a flip side to these discussions.
Chief, did you also want to cover that there's other opticons and things like that we can put up over the roadway to protect the safe passage?
Sure. I mean, you've probably been, Council, you've probably been through intersections by fire departments where there's a traffic control light that could be controlled by what's called an opticon, which is a fast strobing light that's affixed to the police cars that can stop traffic, cross traffic and things like that, pedestrian traffic. So that's something that we'll work with Jeff and others to plan for that roadway as well.
Okay, Jeff, you've had your hand up for a while.
No, I don't think so. I took mine down.
Well, it's still up.
Oh, sorry, the button didn't work. Sorry, Madam Mayor.
Russ?
I want to word a question very carefully to not upset our architects who have worked very hard to present a project. But is there, seeing as the my understanding anyway of costing of projects is that the engineering firm and the construction firm take a percentage of the total cost of the build. So is there a way to add on, for example, the canopy in the back at a later time? Is there a way to lower that cost so that's not as part of this overall project and save some money, or does that just not make sense? And then my second question is the alleyway. Will it be accessible on both West Natchez and Fremont, or just West Natchez?
I can speak to your first question. As far as your second question on both ends, I'll defer to others. So as far as what I would describe as what you're defining, or with regards to the canopy, is what we call bid protection or alternates. So if anyone's heard the term alternates, you build in alternates. It's something that you can either do in one of two ways. You're either doing it as a deductive alternate, where you're considering it part of your project and part of your budget. And if you bid it and it's over, then you take it out. Versus an additive alternate, in which case you're bidding it without that, with this understanding or expectation that you're not going to get it. You still design it, so you still pay to design it and you still put it out to bid. If your bid comes in under, then you take that. And so there's alternates are their own science as far as how we do it, but we use them very readily. We use them in the capacity that they're standalone elements. A canopy is a perfect example. And other certain elements could be done that way as well, that are standalone, easily to describe, have enough meat on them as well that they do offer bid protection. But that's, again, there's a lot of design ahead of the project. There's a lot of continual coordination. As you get into the building itself, you're going to find ways to even tighten up the square footages and things like that. The important part is to get it all cooked well enough that you have a fairly confident and good vision and line of sight on what you're getting for what you're asking for, and you're not asking for too little. We don't want you asking for too much so that it's not successful, but by no means, do you want to be in a position that you're asking for more later? You don't ask for enough at the beginning. So hopefully that answered the bulk of your question. And I'll defer the alleyway question to others.
Joe? You're muted, Joe.
As far as exiting out of the alley, we've kicked that around a little bit. We could open it up where they could exit from the north or go to the south. There's going to have to be some improvements to the approach on Fremont, because right now it's just the old style sidewalk that just has a curb cut across it. So they'll probably have to have more of a commercial approach on that. And then we'd probably have to monitor whether or not it would probably make it better for the police department to be able to exit to the north in case that's the area of town they're going in, instead of having them drive around the block. As long as we don't have competing or conflicts with the apartment house patrons. So I would think that we'd probably look at exiting both directions.
I would agree with that. That just makes sense to me to have that option.
And as far as being in a school zone, or near a school, we've got, obviously we got schools on Fremont, we got school 1, 2, 3 schools on North First Street. So there's always going to be a time when either the police or the fire is going to be going through a school zone that is hot, you know, the 20 mile an hour is going to be in effect. So that's just something that the police will have to deal with. And they'll have to understand that, you know, unless there's just some major type of emergency they got to respond to, they're just going to have to slow down to get through some areas. And because, like I say, we've got schools on two of our main street, or three now, three of our main streets. So they just have to deal with it.
Council, do we have any more questions? Any more questions for Brett? Brett, I think if you're talking, you're muted. Roger?
Did Lisa have any comments she wanted to make? She was part of our committee, Lisa Gordon.
Thanks, Roger. About the plantings and things like that, we had discussed taking some of that out, but there was something like, instead of having plain ballasts, is that what they're called, ballasts? We were talking about putting planters out that would act as the same. So there are ways to add beautification to the lot without creating a whole host of a lot more work. So we like the idea of not using as much water. So you'll still keep that green space that you see, like that's currently used as a soccer field dog park. It may not be used as a soccer field anymore since it's smaller, but it still is usable for the public. So we're trying our hardest to make sure that it's still inviting to the public. There's places to sit, and also just you have elements of design in there without creating too much cost. So that's all I wanted to add about the outside design.
All right, thanks, Lisa. Joe?
Okay. Yeah. You know, down at Public Works, we put cactus, a couple different varieties of cactus and some sagebrush, and we did not install a irrigation system at all. Those plants are by nature able to survive off rainfall and snow, and so we do not water them. So, you know, you can put that type of step plants in that environment and they'll do just fine. So council was kind of quiet there towards the end, so I assume, I just want to recap. So am I right to say we're going to go with option A? We're going to look at eliminating landscape, and we'll see whether or not about adding the additional canopy roofing or leaving it down to the 10 vehicles. Then we'll move ahead with that, and then, you know, flush out some additional ideas with Brett and Kim.
Council, Joe, are you asking for council to kind of give you an idea of what they're thinking?
Well, I want a consensus if that's what you want to move at, or we can discuss this further during our AIS section of the meeting.
Okay.
But we need to wrap this up here in a few minutes because we're running out of time. So if you have any real strong positions or questions, they need to make them now.
Okay, so Jared, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just was curious for Brett. I haven't really looked into McKinsey much. Just curious if there's like a phased approach on these buildings that's ever been done. I just was kind of researching a little bit if there's, you know, if we could build a building like this in certain phases. I know I've seen it with other types of buildings, but I'm not familiar with police stations or anything. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does make sense. Absolutely. There are ways to phase these. It kind of depends on how you're phasing them and what you're looking to expand on. Arguably, because of if we were to spend more time on the flow and the fit of the footprint, there's certain elements of the building that are difficult to phase. But we end up having some situations where there are portions of the building that you could add on, but you have to extract them right now from the building and plan those as a future addition. Other ways to reduce costs up front are what we call shelling out a portion of the building. So if you said, hypothetically, if you said, okay, for court, we're going to save, we're not going to do that right now, but we want to make sure that's in the body of the building. We're going to build out everything else, but we're not going to put the infrastructure in there for the court or those offices or those walls or that element of the building now. We'll do that as a future tenant improvement. Hypothetically, those are some different ways that you can do it. These are very purpose-built facilities, so that's why we try to get them right sized to begin with. But there are, to answer your questions, yes, there's ways to do it. For these types of facilities, they're more challenging than others.
Sure, and just in a brief follow-up, I mean, is that cost effective? I mean, upfront and then long term?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what I would say is that depending on how much, like, you have to look at what you're saving. If you said we're going to build 2,000 square foot onto your building, 100%, that 2,000 square feet is going to cost you much more in a year, 2 years, 5 years than it will today. It just comes down to what your capacity is to fund your project right now. You may not get, if you didn't have a choice, if you're in a position you don't have a choice and you have to wait, then you accept that you're going to pay more later. It's going to be that 5% or more a year that you're going to add on. It's also going to be an addition, so it's going to be more complex. So you're going to pay a bit more per square foot as well. So you are going to pay more in the future if you choose not to do certain portions of them today.
And Jared, I think if you put that out a few years, say you don't do that and you have to go back to the voters to vote, they're going to say, why didn't you put that in the first place? Why are you coming back to us and asking us for more money?
Yeah, I understand that. I think if it was going to be a phased approach, yeah, I mean, you'd have to put all that out there that that long-term plan. But I'm just thinking this is a large sum of money, and how are the people going to look at it, I guess, is my concern. That's all I got, though.
Okay, thanks. So, Joe, do you want us to finish this conversation with your AIS?
Yeah, sure. We'll just bring it up and discuss a little bit more about how we want to proceed on which option it kind of sounds like option A and what we want to do. And we're asking as the committee to now be charged with looking into some funding options and what we can bring back. So.
Okay. Okay, well, unless you have more questions for Brett or Kim, we're going to adjourn the study session and go into our council meeting at 5:30.
Thanks, Brett and Kim.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Have a good night.
Teresa, are we all just hanging online or do we have to log out and log back in?
It's totally up to you. There is no need for you to log out and log back in. There's not a different link if that's what you're referencing.
Yep, that's what I was asking. Thank you.
Mhm.
Can you see and hear me?
I can hear you, Katrina.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, this is Jim. I just want to remind you that we have a commissioner tonight also in case this goes longer.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Hmm. Good evening, everybody. We are now called to order. Roll call, Teresa.
Councilmember Wickenhagen,
Here.
Councilmember Iverson,
Here.
Councilmember Marquis,
Here.
Councilmember Peterson,
Here.
Councilmember Bell,
Here.
Councilmember Costello,
Here.
Councilmember Carlson.
Here.
Everyone's here, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Please stand for pledge allegiance and remain standing for prayer. Teresa, do we have Pastor Katie on tonight?
I have not seen her, Madam Mayor. I just was checking through. I've not heard back.
Okay. Do we have somebody who would like to do prayer tonight?
I'll do it.
Kevin, thank you. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. Gracious Heavenly Father, we just come to you tonight asking for your guidance. Provide each of the council members wisdom in the decisions they're going to make so that we can best serve the citizens of our city. Thank you for all the blessings you have provided us in this past year through all this turmoil. Pray these things through Jesus Christ, your Son. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Kevin. Agenda changes. We're adding under old business M2 on AIS for the update on the Justice and Law Center. Public appearances, introductions, and presentations. We have Katrina Hinkle with the Downtown Association.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. Can you all hear me okay?
We can.
Just making sure. Hey, so there's a lot going on in our community. We got Community Days coming up the third weekend in May. We're all so excited about that. But to get ready for that, we're going to have a citywide cleanup day the second Saturday in May. And so I'll be harassing Public Works to see what their wish list items are and inviting a bunch of volunteers out to help us just get Selah cleaned up for all the guests we'll be having for Community Days. And then on June 18th will be our second annual Sip and Stroll along with Hot Rods on First. So those are all big and exciting events coming up. But in the near future, we have a business workshop Thursday evening at the Civic Center at 6 o'clock, and it's preventing crime through an environmental design. It's aimed at helping our business owners just make sure that they're helping the police to help protect themselves from maybe graffiti or crimes. And so Yakima PD has a certified environmental design expert that's coming in to talk to us. And Chief Chrisman has said he will have some Selah PD there to help answer some Selah specific questions. So we want a good turnout. We want to invite everybody in. And it's just kind of one of the ways that the SDA is trying to work to help the police and help prevent some of the graffiti that's going on. And it's just ways we can empower ourselves to prevent that. And then starting the 14th of March through the 14th of April will be our annual business discovery Easter egg hunt. We have 36 businesses locked in again, and they're hidden all over. They're not at your normal businesses, so y'all get out there and check out our businesses and find those eggs that are hidden all over the place in the non-traditional places. So it's kind of fun. And then B&O, we still have room for B&O contributions. You need to log in and apply by March 30th, and then let me know that you've done that so that I can make sure it gets recorded with the state correctly. And I know the city is allocating public utility taxes as one of our sponsors. Thank you so much. And we're working on our utility box wraps thanks to the help of LTAC funds. So like I said, tons going on. Did I forget anything, or does anyone have any questions? I'm just flipping through on my phone to see if anyone's raising a hand.
Okay, Mike.
Mike, I see you.
The rummage sale.
Thank you. That's why I asked. So we have the rummage sale March 26th, I believe. I don't have my calendar in front of me. I do, it's on my phone, but March 26th, we're accepting donations. Mike's brought a bunch of stuff down. Kevin's brought some stuff down. Russ has brought some stuff down. Not to call you all out, but just to say thank you so much for contributing. I have volunteers ready to go pick up donations or to meet you at the Wells Fargo building. And so we really want to make this another huge success. And I think this year we're going to put some of those funds towards wayfinding signs. So lots of big things we're trying to accomplish here in Selah. Any other questions? I'm flipping through to look. Russ,
like
was that a
we're good.
hand or were you just waving? Oh, okay. Thank you so much for your time, everyone. Have a great meeting, and I'm sure I'll see you all in the community.
Thanks, Katrina. Teresa, do we have any written communications?
No, ma'am, we do not.
Okay. Under communications, we have no oral, no written. Proclamations and announcements, we have none. Consent agenda. All items listed with an asterisk are considered routine by the city council and will be enacted by one motion without discussion. Should any council member request that any item on the consent agenda be considered separately, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and become part of the regular agenda. Cliff?
On the minutes from February 22nd, item number, I had it highlighted. I thought I was going to write to it. N3, it has listed Councilman Carlson seconded the motion and he was absent. And so if we know who seconded that.
Mike?
I believe it was me.
I believe it was you too, but I wasn't sure. With that correction, I move that we accept the consent agenda.
Okay.
Well, second, Ms. Kevin.
Okay. So we have a motion to Russ. You have your hand up?
Yeah, just on that same note, it shows it says Councilman Carlson. Oh, excuse me. No, I read it wrong. Disregard.
Okay. Elizabeth?
So up above. Oh, sorry. I think I saw the same thing you saw. I think I'm okay.
Okay, thanks. So we have a motion to approve by Cliff with the changes of adding Mike's name instead of Russ's as seconding the motion on N2. Is that what it was?
N3.
N3. And we have a second by Kevin. All those in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. Teresa, please read the consent agenda.
Approval of minutes, February 22nd, 2022 council meeting. Approval of claims and payroll. Item number 01, ordinance amending the 2022 council budget for the expenditure of lodging taxes.
Thank you. Public hearings, we have none. General business, under new business, we have none. Under old business, we have Mr. Hinney.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Okay, this item is to real quickly update the council on the progress of the Law and Justice Center and request that the Law and Justice Center Committee be allowed to move forward and bring back funding options. Two options were presented by the architect, option A and option A reduced. We explained the differences between the two options. I believe the consensus was to go with option A and eliminate all of the exterior or perimeter landscaping and the center parking island in the main parking lot, and to maintain the grass area where it's adjacent to the alley and Natchez Avenue. But first of all, is that correct?
Kevin?
I would like to eliminate the epoxy flooring and go with the sealed concrete as part of the reduction as well.
Okay.
Russ?
Just to clarify, Joe, when you talk about removing landscaping, we're removing the grass, right? We're replacing
The grass, the trees, everything that needs water, because I can't remember if the sprinkler system, but it was $30,000-$40,000. So yeah, we eliminate that sprinkler system and we only install for the grass adjacent to Natchez in the alley.
So we'll still need a sprinkler system, but just for the grass. And you're saying
that grass area.
You're saying it's to water all the other stuff is 30 to 40,000.
I thought it was something like that. I can't remember. It was quite a bit. And we'll just install the sprinkler system itself. And like I said, we can put a few, some shrubs in there if that's what they'd like to see, but that don't require an irrigation system. Like I say, down at Public Works, we put in cactuses. I think we got 2 varieties and some sagebrush, and it does okay without having any additional water. Sometimes it was really hot. The guys go out with a hose or a bucket a couple of times, but that normally doesn't happen. So yes.
One of my thoughts, and I'm curious, I would think a drip system with some landscaping, trees and stuff like that would be of interest. One of my concerns is if that 4th Street is going to be a pathway, a walking path, I want to obstruct all views into the police station, into the where the
whole hedge of trees then, like
just the first couple of years they're not going to block much, but
put in whatever the council wants.
I know.
Prepare to pay for it.
I just want to make sure we're creating a sense of security and privacy along that fence line.
Remember, if you're driven by the Yakima wastewater treatment facility on I-82, that they went with poplar trees. They had problems with them, and now they've got in ponderosa pines, and they don't really eliminate much of a view, but whatever you'd like.
Cliff?
I just want to point out that when we talk about eliminating the landscape, we're really talking about minimizing it because part of it's required when you're building a public building. And
sure, there'll still be a rockery, like I say, and we could have put in some like I say, some step environment type of plants that don't require any more than a teaspoon of water, during the summer, but yeah. But if you want to plant some sort of hedge along there, then it's going to require some sort of a sprinkler system, which is going to cost some money. And not much in the water bill, but still.
Roger?
Yes, the parking island in the parking lot was a considerable cost in comparison. Also, I would like to see that removed from the option A.
Roger, could you clarify that? The entire, because I think they talked about doing a basalt rock in there. Or are you saying remove everything, all the concrete and everything?
The reason why I want to see it gone is several things. One is the pain in the butt to try to plow snow around all that. And then if you want to do storm drainage, they were proposing dry wells to be put in multiple locations so they could drain it. But if you eliminate that, then we could probably just sheet flow the entire parking lot all the way from the building southward towards the Nat Cheese, and then put it in a swale. And then you don't have to have all those dry wells that you've got to register with the Department of Ecology and maintain them and whatnot. But if you got curbing out there, then you can't do it. Not if you're going to do all that. So we'd still put some parking lot lights out there. And right now we're exploring possibility of putting solar powered. They've come a long way with the efficiency of those, but yeah, they would come on at dusk and go on to low powered down unless there's movement in there. So we're still looking at some sort of parking lot lighting. And you are correct that you do have to have, I think, 4% or 5% of the area has to be landscape. But yeah, that dry land landscape still landscaping, so that still qualifies as meeting that condition.
Rocky?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just from a layman's terms, I'm not on the committee. I was invited to walk through the West Richland building. A needs assessment has been determined for the size of the building and the accommodations that are needed for PD for the next 30 to 50 years. What is being discussed currently is option A, which is $12,462,000, and an option B of $11,800,000, and a contingency difference of $57,000. Without getting too far into the weeds on things, I believe the question to council is, how much do we want to spend on the law and justice building? And really that's the point of this conversation. Do we want to spend 12 million, say 462,000, or do we want to reduce it to 11,835,000 and then let the committee and the architect or whoever determine what is the best value in that range? I don't want to get too far in the weeds, and I'm trying not to overstep my bounds here, but I just want you to make sure that you understand that if you limit it to, say, just polished concrete, then that's what you're stuck with. And there may be an option out there that comes within the same price as the polished concrete, but we now no longer have that option. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff?
I just wanted to add to what I think was Cliff said, and a couple other council members kind of iterated. So yeah, when we're talking about removing all of the landscaping, there still is landscaping required in trees and shrubs and things like that around the parking area itself. And I think what Joe is alluding to is that the landscaping for the entire site and the larger big open space area, that it'd be beneficial to eliminate landscaping everything and just doing what we're required to do by our own municipal code, which is, I think it was, if I remember correctly, it's like 5% of the total parking area has to be left in landscaping.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yep.
Us.
To Rocky's point, that he made a valid argument. My recommendation, I think Joe has a pretty good assessment of what council feels, but my recommendation would be for the committee to take those that input under consideration, and that we move forward under the option A, and eliminate expenses as the committee deems fit. So that's my recommendation. That's my motion.
May I interject before you vote?
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Cliff. That's where I wanted to see it go. But like follow up a little bit what Rocky said, it's like there was no cost on this so far to extend fiber optics, which comes all the way from Yakima through the city and stops at City Hall. So they have to be extended that, a couple of blocks to get that in there for their internet connection. There might be a couple other nickel and dime items that pop up while we try to finalize this, but I just wanted to make sure that you understand that. And Brett made the point that these are a high level estimate. They are not a complete itemized estimate. I mean, it's like when I talked to him about storm drainage for that. He said it was going to be this type of a system, dry wells, $50,000, could be more, could be less. So I want you guys to understand that this is close. They've got that contingency in there to help with items that may not be thought of and completely identified. So that's what we'd like to do, is move forward with this and come back with some options for council to consider how to fund this facility.
Kevin?
Madam Mayor, are we at a point to make a motion and take a vote on this? Is that what are we being requested for?
Yeah, I made a.
Well, Russ has made a motion to move forward with option A.
Mike second.
And Mike second. So yes. So we have a motion to move forward with option A for Joe to move forward, and by Russ, and a second by Mike. Roger, any discussion? Roger?
I would like to see that as a motion to the committee to bring back to the council funding and build options to complete with option A as the guideline.
Okay.
I'll amend my motion to match that.
Okay. Jared?
I think Kevin had his hand up first, or
Okay.
well, looks like he took it down. So if we move forward with this, we look at plan. I mean, I guess I'm just thinking once we get more specific detailed plans, are we able then to look at options? I mean, I'm just curious how if we are looking to move forward with this, I mean, is this it, or are we going to have options to look at other things, maybe layouts? I don't know.
I think their
Don't wanna-
layout. I think their layout is pretty well done. Joe, can you answer that?
Yes.
Somebody on the committee, maybe?
The floor plan as it was presented is conceptually the floor plan that they want to run with.
Okay.
And as far as some of the finishes and whatnot, that'll be discussed when we get more into design. But the contract with the city has with McKinsey architecture is for phase one, and that is to bring a conceptual design with a conceptual estimate to the council, and then proceed on with McKinsey then probably preparing the next phase of a contract. And there's been some discussion by the committee about, and McKinsey brought it up tonight, so I guess I'll have to call them about a design build option and see how they feel about that and how experience they have and whether they've done that. Sounds like they do and have. So that is to bring back the next phase of this project, is to bring back a contract amendment with McKinsey to proceed to design. The first phase was, like I say, conceptual only. A couple of options that we've kicked around in the committee about how to pay for this. There has been councilmatic bonds, which are by a vote of the council, and what those limits can be. You know, it looks like we have the ability to go up to about 14,300,000, and then to pay that back, or another way was to go the USDA loan, but to pay those two items back, it was going to have to probably take about an 8.5% utility tax for 30 years to pay back one of those two ways of funding this. And the third option is to come back, and we'll have to get hold of a bonding company and see what it would take and what it would cost for us to go out and run a bond in the general election coming up. And so those are the three options that we're going to look at, because there's some decisions to be made on which way to proceed. Obviously, the bonding at the general election is going to require a 60% approval by the public. And whether that passes or fails will be determined then. And if it fails, what do we do? So anyway, some of those items will be discussed. I'll read back some better numbers now that I have an idea of what we're going to be at. That 8.5% was for a $10 million bond for 30 years. So now I got a little better direction of what the number is going to be, so we can kind of finalize that a little bit better. Yeah.
So I just one last question. I mean, looking forward. So we've got the court and council chambers there. So long term, will the plan be to move the court from where it's currently at to this building once this is complete?
That's the long-term plan, yes, is to move council and the court system over there.
And what will be done, I guess, and City Hall will stay City Hall. And so that unused space, what will we do with that?
Well, there's a couple, I mean, we'll have to throw some ideas out. One of them is to, we talked about doing some remodeling here at City Hall, rewiring, doing this, doing that. So maybe we put offices back there for some of the functions that are here, and turn the other one into solely a meeting room. I mean, I don't know. I mean, or you can always not move council, just put the courtroom up there. We can go several different ways, but if we looked at the building, obviously, if we was going to move the council and the courthouse or either one of those, we had to indicate an area to be allocated of the building for that function.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think then I would just like to kind of see some sort of plan of what, you know, I'm sure that we could use the office space or whatnot, but I would just like to see, that way we don't have these empty rooms like the last 2 years. We have a bunch of empty space not being used, out of our control. But I would just kind of like to see a plan for the old building and how we're going to utilize that to integrate it into this. That way we can just know what we're going to do.
Yeah, right now we just kicked around a couple ideas, but do you guys know that the heating system or the air conditioning system makes so much noise that people have a hard time hearing what council's saying? Council has a hard time hearing what the people are saying. So yeah, just conducting business in there right now isn't the easiest. And so then we talked about, say, they were wanting to have, the way it seemed like it's going, if we're going to go back to open meetings, you got to provide some sort of closed circuit television and different things. So we would just spend the money once and have that courtroom / council chambers have those amenities so that we're in compliance with whatever these new requirements wind up being.
All right, fair enough. Well, I'll stop pressing on that.
That's fine. Yeah.
Somebody else had their hand up. Russ, did you just take your hand down? Okay. Okay. So, Russ, will you repeat your motion with the amendment to it?
So my motion is to direct the Law and Justice Center Committee to proceed with option A, the building proposal, and evaluate the funding scenarios for the building.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table by Russ. Mike, did you second it? Okay, and you still want a second with the amended?
Yes.
Okay, okay. All those in favor, Roger?
No, what I really asked for was to bring back building options also on that. So can we have that as part of your motion, Russ? Because that would include what Joe introduced as being design build, which might be different than the path we're on right now.
I will amend my motion to direct the Law and Justice Center Committee to proceed with the chosen building proposal and build options proposed by the City Council to evaluate funding scenarios and building options for option A.
And I still second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Russ, a second by Mike. All those in favor, raise your hand. It's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, guys, there you go. Resolutions, we have none. Ordinances, that was on the consent agenda. Public appearances, we have none. Reports and announcements. Chief Lang.
Good evening, everyone. I'll try to make this quick. All I really have to tell you is that currently we have 3 grants written: a SAFER grant, an AFG grant, and a public education grant. Currently working on another DNR grant, and there's supposed to be another DNR grant becoming available within the next week to 2 weeks that we're kind of watching out for. So lots of opportunities maybe to get some extra funding there. I did have a meeting with the DNR yesterday on a wildfire ready neighbors program, and mostly that's going to affect our county response area. But what it does for the city, or one of the target areas I have for the city, is 4th Street Loop, Harris, and the west side of Southern, targeting that area to get people educated on how to protect their homes and their property, you know, when that hill burns again, because it burns every couple of years, and we don't want a catastrophic event of losing houses. So we're going to be putting out some information. There's a public announcement coming out from the Commissioner of Public Lands here next month. And then there'll be a lot of social media and news stuff on that. So we're really gearing up for that right now and trying to get through all this grant process. Is there any questions for me? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Chief Chrisman.
Well, first off, thank you, Council, for moving this forward. We'll do our best to bring back as much information as possible. We really have left quite a bit on the floor in the past, and the council's or the committee has worked really hard. to get this zeroed in. So I want you to know that. The only other thing I want to share with you tonight is that we have amped up our traffic enforcement in the city. And I'm happy to tell you that our collisions are down. And but with that, our drug seizures are up. So as we're stopping more vehicles, we're finding more paraphernalia and drug items that are moving through our city. So the guys have been very busy, but the good news is we're getting the collision rate down, and that was really alarming there for a little bit. So if there's anything that you see around town that you want the police department to address, I would encourage you to give me a call directly, and I'll make sure that that our guys get eyes on whatever it is that is a concern of yours. Any questions? Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Wallace.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just want to go through some of the projects. The wastewater sewer improvement project is going to be starting on March 21st. That's the start date. They're going to start at on Natchez and then work their way to the west up to 4th. We have some bid openings coming up. Fremont Avenue Sidewalk Project. That bid opening will be March 22nd at 10 a.m. The water meter project, the bid opening for that is going to be March 31st at 10 a.m. And then we have the Crusher Canyon Sewer Improvement Project. That bid opening is scheduled for April 13th at 10 a.m. You'll see some RFPs in the paper here shortly. One will be for the South First Street and the North Weenass beautification areas for landscape maintenance. I'm hoping to get those out in the paper in the next couple days. We're also working on the Woodfield outfield fence RFP, and I foresee that going out to add in the next 2 weeks. And then our engineers are working on the West Fremont Avenue grind and overlay. That's currently in design. And then the Natchez Avenue sidewalk project is about 95% complete. We did meet with PP&L today to get some of the street lights disconnected from their power system so that we can take those down and then do the improvements prior to that project going out. Does anyone have any questions for me? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Peters.
I have no report this evening.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Shab.
Good evening. All I've got is our soccer leagues are filling up quick. So if you guys know anybody who wants to play, tell them to call Kelsey, because I think we've got 2 or 3 leagues that are full and have wait lists already. So soccer registration is going good. That's all I have.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Council. Mr. Wickenhagen.
Only thing I have is that as I was asked at the study session was to look into the tablets used by Union Gap. They use iPad Airs. I also found that Verizon also sells those for a monthly fee. Monthly fee was less what the actual cost of them is. So that might work to our benefit if that's where we're purchasing our phones through. Besides that was all I had.
Thank you. Mr. Carlson.
I just want to report on LTAC. We had a meeting this last week. We obviously you saw in your packet the change for the expenditures for Parks and Rec. But another project we approved was for that field, the Battlefield fence there at Archer Park at Woodfield at Carlin Park. I forget how it all goes around. But anyway, Rocky's been working pretty hard on that one. And the Legion team came to the LTAC requesting for some additional funding to cover their their wants and wishes, and they are working hard to raise more money to keep this program going and cover the costs for all the athletes. So if you get a chance to reach out to Rob Archer and participate in some of that advertising, I think they'll greatly appreciate that.
Thank you, Russ. Russ, did you have a good turnout for your meeting?
Yes, for attendance, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, we had 4 out of the 6. We did receive one notification of somebody who may need to change their time commitment to LTAC, and I recommended they speak with you.
Okay, thanks. Rocky?
Thank you. Just going off of what Mr. Carlson said, the Selah School District has been gracious enough to purchase the fence screening that is needed for the complete outfield fence. So they will be making that purchase once we have the new fence installed. So thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Bell?
No report, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Costello?
I have no report, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Peterson?
Got an email from YCOG yesterday, I think it was, that they're moving forward to bringing forth a regional crime resource center for Yakima Valley, in which they'd have 2 public safety staff on staff and be able to coordinate, track crimes throughout the valley, so the various agencies could work together and have centralized analysis. Maybe Chief Chrisman could go into that more detail understanding of what it is exactly. Their COG has asked if we would like to have a study session with them, that they could explain it in more detail, and if we would like to participate in that program. The first year cost would be estimated at, I can't find the right page.
I think it was 14,000.
Yeah, it's something like 14,000, which could come out of APRA money, and year 2 is like 10,000. And so just sort of a feel of if we would like COG to go into it in a study session with us in more detail. And if we would like to, and Dan, do you have something that you know more about, explain better than I can?
Well, I'm not sure about that, Cliff, but I can tell you that my understanding is if one or more cities doesn't come to the table, it may collapse the entire project. So I was at a chief's meeting this morning. There was a pretty robust discussion about this regional crime center and a lot of questions. And so I think it's a fair request to have YVCOG come and talk to the council if it's something you want to know more about. What they'd like to do is hire 2 crime analysts and a manager. And then inside of that building, they would be able to process data for the various people at the stakeholders, the various cities. Also included in that building would be a NIBIN device or machine that would study shell casings from shootings. The closest one that we have is in the Tri-Cities, which requires us to drive down there with the shell casings from any shooting, then have the casing studied and the data inputted into the system. And then we kind of wait in line for that data to be married with any other shell casings that match that NIBIN signature. Having it locally here would be a lot better. I talked to Moxie this morning, and they're actually driving their casings all the way up to Cheney to the state crime lab, and then they're waiting several weeks to get the data inputted. There's also an indication that this could be a repository for a rapid DNA machine, which would be phenomenal for forensics and would support that. And that may come under a grant through the sheriff's office, through the county. So there's a lot of excitement about it, but it's quite a bit of money. So I'm sure YVCOG would be able to answer those questions for us.
And Cliff, if I remember right, the general YVCOG meeting, they're going to be talking about this, and they would like all of the chiefs and council members to attend that meeting. It's on Zoom, and they're going to give out a lot of information that night.
And I think, council, that they would like, I was trying to find the email I got, but I think they would like a commitment from every city by April 19th.
April 29th.
29th. Okay.
29th.
Yeah. So, either we're in or we're out, and that we give them, a yay or a nay.
Okay. Russ?
Can you clarify, this is a crime scene center, but it would be funded and run by YVCOG? So they would be independent from all other agencies?
Well, the staffing would be done by YVCOG. They would like to hire these two folks. It seems pretty clear to me that all of the cities and county that participate would be funding this. That's why they're looking at, how much it would cost based on population. So it's a ratio to determine how much like Selah would pay versus Yakima. And that's, I think Cliff probably has that graph in front of him, that says exactly what each city would pay on year 1, year 2, year 3 on down the road.
Yeah, I found that page right now. Year 1 for Selah would be, it's estimated currently at 14,840, and year 2 would be 10,807. And then because of inflation and things, it goes up, and they have a 6-year projection, but once you get past year 2, they'd be able to refine the budget and go by what actual operating costs actually are. And their goal, the reason that they want an answer by the end of April, is because their goal is to hire the 2 people to begin training in July, to have it operational by the 1st of the year.
Council may remember that there's a push right now to sort of regionalize some of these services. You heard Sheriff Udell talking about regionalizing dispatch services. This is another opportunity to get a sort of a regionalized approach where, maybe Selah wouldn't use a crime analyst full time, but boy, when we need a crime analyst, they are really an invaluable tool, a valuable tool to our arsenal. So it'd be nice to be able to reach out to a regional crime center and actually have an analyst who could process data or heat map something or give us a pin map of specific crimes that we're dealing with, whether it be graffiti or assaults or robberies or things like that. So that's the one thing that would be beneficial for the city, is to have access to that without having a full-time staff member on our books. And it sounds like the idea behind this is that there'd be quite a bit of, it'd go deeper than that, right? Rapid DNA analysis, the NIBIN machine, GIS mapping, things like that, that we just don't have access to today.
Thank you, Chief. Cliff, did you have anything else?
No, that's all I have.
Thank you. Ms. Markey?
No real report, Madam Mayor. I just did want to commend and thank the committee and Chief Chrisman on all the work that went into that proposal that we saw tonight. That was clearly a lot of work, and I really appreciated that.
Thank you. Mr. Iverson?
I have no report this evening.
Thank you. Mr. Case?
I have no public report.
Thank you. Mr. Henney?
Just that I think we've got, as far as staff wise, is wrapped up the proposed contract between us and the solid waste contractor BDI. They have sent this agreement to their attorney for a final review and printing, and then they'll send it to us, and then I'll have Rob look it over, and then once we're both happy with the language, then we'll be having a study session on that with council. So that should hopefully be coming here pretty soon. We'll see how long it takes them to complete that. Okay, well, thanks for giving direction on the Law and Justice Center. We'll keep pushing on that one. Really, that's about it. Everybody's busy. We just got a million things going on. More keep coming in. And I think that regional crime lab, wasn't that March 16th? They're having a meeting on that, Sherry? I believe that.
Yes, it is. It's on a Wednesday night.
Yeah, so they'll be doing that. And then I guess after Morris presented, and she hasn't, and Mrs. Wickenhagen hasn't sent out the agenda yet, but she says she'll be doing that. Yeah, then once more is known, yeah, there'll probably be a study session with council, and if there's time to get it done by the 29th.
Okay.
I think that's all I have.
All right. I just have a request came in for, they're looking for 2 members, council members, citizens of the city. You know, they're always trying to fill boards, trying to get people to step up. The Salmon Recovery Board, the funding board, is looking for 2 people to sit in on that. It will require, there's a late meeting that is a full day in April. In May, there's 2 to 3 days of project site tours. In August, it's 1 to 2 day project evaluations. And basically the requirements that they're asking for is that you have knowledge about the Yakima Basin. So if you're interested, or if you know somebody who is interested in salmon recovery, give me a call. That's all.
Is it?
No, go ahead.
Is it Selah, City of Selah, or just Selah community?
They're looking for anybody. If you know somebody who lives in Yakima and you want to reach out to them, it's not just Selah. They're looking for people to fill these positions. Okay. And that's all I have.
Move to adjourn.
Okay. Motion by Cliff to adjourn. Oh, come on, you guys. Second?
Second.
Roger seconded. All those in favor? Unanimous. Have a good night.